We have 3 speakers, kind of from the nonprofit and design sector, and then 3 more speakers coming from a range of nurseries and parks and things like that. So it'll go really quick. You'll get a lot of different perspectives of what's working in different areas in the Bay Area and beyond. And our first speaker is one of the funders of this event, the Chesapeake Bay Trust. We have Lianna Gomori-Ruben, who is my main contact with this project. We've been working quite closely the last couple of months. She is an Urban Trees Senior Program Officer, the Chesapeake Trust, working in the intersection of urban forestry, agriculture, and grant management, which is a lot of paperwork. So thank you for that effort to manage all the funds that help things like this happen. She was a founding teacher for 2 green middle schools and a grant writer for gender equality in STEM. She holds a master's in environmental management, a master's of arts in teaching, and a graduate certificate in labor studies. With that, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for telling us about your programs.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to share my screen. All right, can everybody see my screen? Sorry, and I can't see any faces.
We were giving you a thumbs up. So
you're giving me a thumbs up. Okay, thank you. Great. So hi, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. As Andrew so eloquently introduced me, my name is Lianna Gomori-Ruben, and I'm the Senior Program Officer for the Urban Trees Grant Program at the Chesapeake Bay Trust. So today I'm going to speak to you a bit about our grant program, as well as a component of it, an experimental piece, which is called the Nursery Project.
Arrow keys might work too if it helps you.
What did you say? Sorry, what did you say?
An arrow keys are a good shortcut too if that helps. So
okay. All right, thank you so much. So who are we? We are the Chesapeake Bay Trust. We are a nonprofit grant-making organization and quasi-state agency that was created in 1985 by the Maryland General Assembly. And our goal is to increase stewardship of our shared natural resources through grant programs, special initiatives, and partnerships that support K-12 environmental education, on-the-ground watershed restoration, community engagement, and the underlying science of these 3 realms. So we have a lot of different grant programs, something like 30. The program I'm working with is the Urban Trees Grant Program. And this grant program came out of the Tree Solutions Now Act of 2021, which is legislation that was passed by the Maryland General Assembly. This legislation recognized that climate change is urgent and we need to take action, and that trees are a critical piece of the puzzle to solving this. So this act committed the state of Maryland to planting 5 million native trees all over the state by 2031. And of that total, 10% were specifically designated to make sure that they are in the areas that are most heavily impacted by climate change, that are on the front lines of the impacts that communities are facing, such as urban heat island effect. And so 10% of those trees, 500,000, have been set aside to be planted in urban underserved areas as defined in the statute. And the Chesapeake Bay Trust was tasked with administering a grant program to ensure that these trees reach those areas. And we were tasked with that because of our track record and our mission of engaging and empowering diverse groups to take action that enriches natural resources and their local communities in the Chesapeake Bay region. So that's our piece of this puzzle, is the urban underserved trees in and the 10% of that goal. And we do this in collaboration with other state agencies, such as the Department of Natural Resources, Department of Transportation, the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Energy. And all of us are responsible for a piece of this puzzle. So to date, the Urban Tree Grant Program has officially announced 2 years of awards, and we are about to announce the 3rd year any day now. So those award letters should be distributed hopefully this week. And once those are out, we will have funded 105 projects. We will have awarded $27 million, and we will have either planted or plan to plant 60,000 trees. So we still have quite a bit of work to do and many trees to plant, but we are well on our way, and we are investing heavily in making sure that native trees are reaching these areas that are so heavily impacted by climate change. Urban underserved communities, what do we mean by that? This is defined by the statute, and all of the trees that are planted with the funds in our program have to, 1, be in urban areas, which are defined by the census, and 2, additionally, underserved. And in order to meet the underserved criteria, they have to meet at least one of the criteria on the screen, which is a history of disenfranchisement, which means either redlining or being graded as hazardous, have high unemployment levels at higher than the state average, low income levels at or below 75% of the state median, or the presence of housing projects. And so to determine if a site is eligible for funds to plant trees through our program, we use this mapping tool, which was developed by the Department of Natural Resources. You can see that the gray areas are urban, and then the orange is where the other underserved criteria are layered on top of it. So by putting the address into the box and making sure that a location shows up as orange, that's how we identify areas that are eligible for these funds. Eligible applicants, eligible project sites, and eligible expenses. The entities that are eligible to apply for our program are nonprofit organizations, schools and institutions of higher education, service, youth and civic groups, neighborhood community associations, counties, municipalities, and forest conservancy district boards. The sites that are eligible for planting are street tree pits, vacant lots, institutional grounds, other private or public property. Really anywhere is eligible. It's just a matter of securing the permissions needed to plant in that space. And the eligible expenses for the program, our funds can cover supplies, site preparation, personnel, and other expenses and materials related to planning, implementing, and maintaining tree planting projects in underserved areas. Now that piece is defined by statute, and we received some feedback from some of our grantees, some of our community groups, that they wanted a little more flexibility in their projects to do things like pay for food if you're going to bring out community members, or pay for flowers if you want to focus on beautification. And so the trust has secured some private funds to add into the mix. So grantees can ask for up to $2,000 for community needs that indirectly support greening. So for example, you can see a picture here. This is from one of our grantee projects, the Upton Planning Committee in Baltimore. That beautiful tree pit is surrounded by metalwork from a local artist and flowers, and again, for them, beautification was a priority. So after listening to them and some others, we're excited to be able to offer some pieces like that for these community projects. Project timeline. A typical project in our program is about 3 years and has 3 phases. Phase 1 is the planning and outreach phase, in which we offer funding for time to engage the community members, finalize the selection of sites, select the species of trees, make sure you have the right tree for the right place, obtain all of the permissions necessary. I think anybody who's doing urban tree planting work knows that it's not as simple usually as just putting a tree in the ground. There's usually a lot of behind the scenes work that has to be done to make sure that the project will be successful. So we do build in funding for people to put in the time and the energy to make sure that they have set everything up for success. Obtaining permission, evaluating site constraints, checking for utilities. Are there underground utilities to be aware of? Are there overhead power lines? Planning the planting events themselves, especially if volunteer engagement is an important piece of the project, and then finalizing orders and contracts with your nurseries or your contractors. Then phase 2 is implementation, which is the part of the project that is actually planting the tree in the ground. And the funds cover site preparation, things like breaking up concrete, stump grinding, removing invasive species, the planting of the trees themselves, installing protections, amending soil, and applying mulch. And then as soon as the trees are planted begins phase 3, which is a requirement of 2 years of maintenance. And that is because we know, and I believe most people on this call know, that it's not enough to just plant a tree in the ground. And, it's really important that we plant them with an eye towards their survival. And young trees, especially those planted in urban areas, are extremely vulnerable and do need ongoing care to ensure that they are likely to survive. And so we require that grantees include 2 years of maintenance with regular watering, especially during the summer, especially during those heat waves. Applying mulch, monitoring tree protections. We know that deer browse is an issue. We know that lawnmowers can be an issue, or cars. So, it's really important to make sure that that care is in place, as well as weeding for invasive species. We would hate to plant all these trees and not have taken the precautions to support their survival. So I'd like to introduce you to a few of our grantees. I believe some of them might even be on our call today. I selected 4 out of our total, just to give you a sense of different counties and different types of projects, different sites, different entities. So first we have Baltimore Tree Trust. We've had a multi-year relationship with them. And with our funding, they've been able to almost double their tree planting capacity, as well as their staff. And so we've seen them expand their neighborhood forestry initiative, which is a really amazing workforce development program in which they build pathways for people to enter this growing field of urban forestry and get on track for all of the great and different career paths available. We've also seen them expand their outreach and communications team to make sure that they're connecting with community members, getting buy-in and ownership of the tree planting from the community, so that these tree plantings are set up for long-term success and long-term stewardship. Next, the City of Rockville in Montgomery County. This project is a really great example of this is their Red Gate restoration project. So they've taken an old golf course that is now closed, and they are restoring it and reforesting it so that it returns to its original habitat and reconnects with the rest of the Rock Creek watershed corridor. It's a popular site for birders. They hope to plant 10,000 native trees and shrubs through this project. Prince George's County, a municipality, we actually work with 2 of their departments, the Department of Public Works and Transportation and the Department of the Environment. DPWT plants in the right of way. And so they've planted, they have multiple years of grants from us and have planted 8,000 trees. And then the Department of the Environment works with municipalities and local NGOs to develop tree planting projects and programs. So altogether, our work with Prince George's County so far has amounted in 10,000 trees. And finally, the Anne Arundel Watershed Stewards Academy is from Anne Arundel County, and they're a great example of a community-based organization. Their project planted 80 trees at carefully selected sites in low-income communities. They developed a tree stewardship program, and they provide stipend or tree ambassador program in which they provide stipends to participants and training so that community members can become stewards. So now that brings me to the other piece, which is the Nursery project. So back when we were standing up the grant program, back in 2021, 2022, the question was raised, which is that, do we in the state of Maryland or in this region have the native tree stock that we need for at least us, the Chesapeake Bay Trust, to accomplish our goal from the Tree Solutions Now Act of getting 500,000 trees in the ground by 2031? And so to figure that out, we had a listening session with representatives from the landscape nursery industry and from the University of Maryland Extension. And out of that emerged a gap, which was that we didn't even have at that time a shared list of native trees that would do well in urban areas. So one of our key partners, Dr. Karen Berghardt, from the University of Maryland Extension worked with her team to develop that list of 84 native trees that we could all at least have a shared conversation for these urban projects. And so of those 84 trees, we knew that the market would drive production of the fastest, cheapest, and easiest to grow species. So for example, we know that red maples make up 30% of the trees in Baltimore. Now this is a problematic way to have an urban forest if it's heavily dominated by one type of tree. We know that pests and pathogens can come and wipe out wipe out a certain species, like with Dutch elm disease or with the emerald ash borer, and we're currently seeing issues with American beech trees. So we don't set us up for resiliency in our urban canopies when we have one tree so heavily represented. We also know that it limits the ecological benefits. When we have a diverse tree canopy in our cities, we get a diverse host of wildlife, a diverse array of ecological benefits. So there's resiliency and ecological reasons to want to diversify our urban tree canopy. So then that led to the next part of this study, which was we wanted to determine which tree species of the 84 were and were not being grown by growers, which ones planters wanted but they could access, and which ones planters wanted but couldn't access, and which species that growers would grow if they knew there was demand for them. So that led to, through Dr. Berghart's team, a survey of all the growers and planters to develop the agreement and opportunity species list. And they determined of the 84, which ones were currently grown and in demand. And therefore, for our purposes, we weren't that concerned with investing in them. The market was taking care of them. The opportunity species, in that they were less commonly grown, but in demand from planters. Which species growers would grow, but there was no evidence that planters wanted them. And then which ones planters would plant, but growers wouldn't say they would grow. And so we walked away from that research with a final list of agreement and opportunity at 47 species, which again, for our purposes, were the ones worth investing in. So that led to the Nursery project RFI, RFP. So it had two parts. The first was a RFI, or a request for information, where we asked for data from the nursery community about the tree species that they had that were currently available for our grantee projects and how much they cost. And we wanted to collect this data to make it available on our website so that when prospective applicants were preparing projects, they knew who they could contact, they knew how to create budgets, how much their projects would cost, and what was available. And then the second piece was a request for proposals. And here is where our goal was to diversify the native tree species that would be ultimately planted in our projects. And our goal was to grow 7,000 native trees from a list of 47 species, that opportunity and agreement list. And we want those trees to be available for delivery and or pickup in fall 2026 and spring 2027, on the assumption that it takes about 3 years for nurseries to grow trees that will be ready and appropriate for urban projects. So the results of these two pieces, the first part, we had 9 nurseries respond, and we posted all the data to our website. Those 9 nurseries are currently being contacted by applicants as they prepare applications. And we just noticed that of those 84 species, 26 are currently being grown by more than 3 growers, 24 are being grown by 2 to 3, 23 species are grown by 1, and then 11 aren't being grown by anyone. So again, sort of tracking with how many species are already taken care of by the market and how many are opportunity species that we can think about increasing the availability. And then for part 2, the production of less commonly available trees, we had 7 nurseries respond, 4 nurseries were selected. And so of those 4, we have 20,030 trees that are currently being grown that will ultimately result in 9,180 trees delivered to our grantees in fall 2026 and spring 2027. Our total investment level is $752,993. And then of those 47 less commonly available species, we're growing 44 of them. And just a little bit more about what we've ended up growing. I won't read all the species names, but you can see the groups of the species that we're going to have over 1,000 of, which ones are in the 200 to 1,000 range, the 50 to 150 range, and then the ones that nobody wanted, that we haven't walked away from this particular project with anybody growing. And so the next steps for us are to design a matching process. With these trees being available in fall 2026, it means that we are likely going to build this into our application process in fall 2025. And what we're going to try to do is match all of the trees that are being grown with the projects that are interested and available. And so, for example, we have a lot of different types of projects. Some of them are your classic street tree projects, and others are in lawns or parks or these big open spaces. Some of them are focused on residences who have aesthetic goals or wildlife goals. And different trees are suited for different projects. So we're going to be trying to think about that in our matching process. We also want to think about economic efficiency. We don't want to set up a nursery in the south to deliver one tree to a project in the north. So a lot of considerations. And again, we'll be thinking through all of this over the next year. But I appreciate the opportunity to share about this exciting work with you. We're excited to diversify the trees that are available for these urban projects and work with nurseries and build these relationships and kind of merge the market, the science, and the community interests with the funds and the goals of this legislation.
I don't know if you're seeing it, but there's plenty of applause popping up in emojis down there. So all the emoji claps. Very, very cool project. Very good. Well, I'm sure people will have plenty of questions for you in our question and answer session at the end of this section. So please stick around if you can. And I'm sure folks will be fielding you all sorts of questions about the mechanics of that.